What's up guys, welcome back to another GGF video review, and today I'll be taking a look at the brand new Tower 600 from Thermaltake. Now we saw the Tower 300 launch at CES earlier this year, so this one here is the slightly larger chassis to the Tower 300. So the main changes are we have ATX support for the motherboard instead of the MATX and ITX on the 300, which made the Tower 300 a little bit weird because that MATX form factor is a bit of a strange one because most people either go ATX or ITX, so now having the Tower 600 with ATX support should be pretty good. Now, we've seen the Tower series for quite a while from Thermaltake. I think the Tower 900 came out probably 6-7 years ago now. So that was basically a square box, 4 sides, that was it. But that case was very, very popular. But now we have the Tower series from the 3 and now the 600, whereas this is actually 8 sides. So technically, it's still a square box, but they've just done some angles on each of the sides. So now we have 8 sides to the case. So basically in this review, I'll go everything you need to know about motherboard support, the storage options, the water cooling options, and also all-in-one cooler support as well. So let's jump in and get started. The Tower 600 was showcased at Computex this year and is the bigger brother to the already available Tower 300. Apart from its larger size and now ATX motherboard support, we also find a few upgrades and improvements over the Tower 300. The case is available in a few color options, and due to limited review samples, I only have the white model to look at today. Exterior aesthetics are a bit different to your traditional ATX chassis, but Thermaltake have been doing their Tower series for many years now. For case dimensions, both height and width stay the same as the Tower 300, only the depth has been bumped up to 420mm compared to 342 on the Tower 300. This new refreshed design, just like on the Tower 300, gives us a modern take on the older, more traditional square chassis. There's a total of 8 sides to the Tower 600. The front 3 are all toolless, removable tempered glass side panels. On the white model, they are 100% clear, and as I said earlier, I only have the white model, so I cannot comment on the black's version glass tint. The very 2 middle side panels are toolless and are held in via magnets, while each hold a magnetic dust filter and gives us access to the removable radiator brackets. The next 2 sides don't really have any function, but from what I saw at Computex, each of these sides can pop out and can be replaced with an aesthetic RGB cover instead for some behind desk glow. Then the final side is the very rear. This panel holds yet another magnetic removable dust filter, and this panel is also removable and held in place via magnets. One improvement on this back panel over the Tower 300 is with the PSU area. On the Tower 300, the PSU cutout at the rear was a full rectangle, meaning if you had your system powered up and running, the PSU's power cable had to be fed through the panel. Now on the Tower 600, this area is a cutout with a break at the bottom, allowing you to remove the back panel completely with the PSU still powered. The top panel is also removable and houses another clip-in dust filter. Another dust filter can be found at the bottom and covers this whole area. I do appreciate the filter rails that run the full length of the case, making installation that little bit easier, as on cases that have segmented rails, the filters never go in smoothly. The final 3 dust filters can be found on the lower front ventilated panels, 2 small removable ones on each side, and a larger filter can be found on the very front removable panel. This lower middle panel can be removed to help gain access to the bottom of the Tower 600. It can also be replaced altogether with Thermaltake's optional screen add-on. The swap-out panel is provided with the Tower 600, but you will need to purchase a USB LCD screen separately, which retails for $90 US. Most of the Tower 600 is made from steel, apart from the top cover, feet and dust filters, which are made from plastic. Front I/O can be found at the front at the top of the chassis. I'm wondering if this would have been better suited at the bottom of the chassis rather than the top. Let me know what you think. Here you'll find a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C port, 4 USB 3 Type-A ports, which is nice, separate audio and mic ports with power, reset, hard drive and power LEDs in the very middle. Moving inside the Tower 600, we find it very similar to the Tower 300, and as I said earlier, the main difference here is ATX motherboard support. First off, motherboard orientation is inverted, shooting all I/O straight up. This has been the standard on all Thermaltake Tower cases and also on the new CTE lineup. It's definitely not for everyone, but it does give them more variety in their case lineup. Motherboard rear I/O cables are fed down from the top through either of the 2 cutouts. The back of the motherboard tray has a cutout to help plug cables in, and yes, Thermaltake does provide this roll of Velcro ties. Although eATX motherboard support is not listed, I was still able to install my test ROG Z790 Extreme. I did have to remove the right PSU cover for 24-pin access, and the left PSU cover will need to be removed for motherboard SATA and surrounding port access. Moving back down to ATX, I can now put the PSU covers back in as ATX boards are really what this case is designed for. For motherboard cable routing, there are plenty of options here, and you'll find there are no cable grommets at all, which I actually don't mind. The 24-pin cable is fed down through the PSU cover, and there's two options here, while one cutout can be found for SATA and so on. For the top of the motherboard and EPS, I had no issues here, two cutouts can be found, but EPS does seem to be getting close to the side radiator location, and I'll cover clearances on that later. While at the bottom of the motherboard, you'll find large cutouts covering the full length of the board. The Tower 600 has full back connect motherboard support. No issues here with my Test Tough Z790 BTF or my MSI Z790 Project Zero board. For GPU clearances, there is 281mm if keeping the left PSU cover installed. I found out of all my test air-cooled GPUs, this cover had to be removed. The closest GPU that came to fitting was a 7900 XTX reference card, but still failed on the cover. With the cover now removed, there is 400mm of GPU clearance, and you can see with my test Strix 4090 that it now runs down into the bottom chamber. For waterblock cards, I was able to pop the PSU cover back in, as nearly all the time block cards are going to be shorter. For GPU width for terminal clearance, there's roughly 210mm here, which is more than enough for my test Strix 4090 with an EK block. For CPU air cooler height clearance, there is also 210mm. The Tower 600 also has vertical GPU support. Technically in this case layout, it really just rotates the GPU. The supplied brackets are provided, and all you need is the riser cable. I used the Thermaltake PCIe 4.0 dual 90-degree riser cable, which is 130mm long. To go with this GPU layout, you first need to rotate the PCIe bracket at the top by removing 4 screws, rotating and screwing back down. Then screw the PCIe riser cable to the supplied riser cable bracket A, like so. I found it best to then mount this assembly into the PCI slot, then mount the GPU into your desired PCI slot on the case. Next, attach the riser cable to your GPU while carefully slotting the bracket into the case, then screw the bracket to the case, and it should look something like this. Lastly, to stop any bus wobble, grab the riser cable bracket B from the accessory kit, and you'll find 2 screws designed for plastic. Slide this bracket in until it clicks into place, then screw down. Lastly, screw the riser cable bracket into this bracket. GPU wobble was kept to a minimum, but one thing to note with this setup is side radiator and fan support will be reduced. Moving around the back, and here you'll find PSU and all the storage options in the Tower 600. The PSU is installed at the bottom via a removable bracket, and total PSU length here, including cables, is about 255mm or 220mm, not including cables. For storage, there are 2 locations, one removable tray directly behind the motherboard supporting one 3.5-inch hard drive or 2 2.5-inch SSDs. The second area is beside the PSU via a removable sled which holds one 2.5-inch SSD. In terms of rear cable management, Thermaltake has added a bunch of plastic clips down each side of the chassis and a few more tie-down points around the motherboard tray. I'll touch base on how rear cable management went at the end of the video once the build is completed. Moving on to cooling, and the Tower 600 comes with 2 pre-installed 140mm Thermaltake CT140 non-ARGB fans, which retail for about $30 for a 2-pack. These are on a removable bracket, and this area is for fans only up to 35mm. And when it comes to including fans with cases, I'm never a fan, as most times you just need to buy more or end up not using them at all. But for the Tower 600, and with an all-in-one cooler setup, for most users, the 2 included fans are all you'll need, along with the 3 that come with the all-in-one cooler that you end up using. Apart from the 2 main radiator spots, which I'll cover soon, there are a few more dedicated fan locations, and I feel most won't really need to use these. There's a 120/140 spot at the very bottom of the chassis for intake, which would come in handy for some extra GPU cooling. Another 120/140 above the PSU cover. Then the rear cover panel has 2 120/140 fan mounts, but this becomes a bit messy as they attach directly to the rear panel, so you can never fully remove the back panel once fans are installed and cable managed. For all-in-one cooler support, there are 2 locations, the right and left side, and these are not the same in terms of support. Radiators are installed on removable brackets outside the case and dropped into place. The right spot, being the primary location, supports up to 4 20mm all-in-one coolers, and my test Thermaltake TH420V2 installed no problem at all. One thing to note here is in regards to motherboard EPS cables, and they may be a bit tight if using custom sleeved cables. The stock flat style PSU cables definitely worked better here. The right location also supports 360 all-in-one coolers, and my test ROG Strix LC3 installed fine, and EPS clearance here is better than with the 420. Moving to the left side location, the max support here is up to 360mm all-in-one coolers, and this is due to the PCIe bracket area. Although my test all-in-one cooler installed fine, the AIO may need to be flipped with ports at the bottom, and the reasoning for this is for tube clearance with your GPU. Unless your GPU has its own all-in-one cooler, then running ports up the top shouldn't be an issue. I really like the look of this layout, but one issue I see here is you'd either be blowing hot air straight into your GPU, or you'd be starving your GPU depending on how you have the all-in-one cooler fans orientated. For custom radiator support, the two main locations once again will be the right and left sides. For the right radiator support, there is up to 420 with a max radiator length of 465mm and a max radiator thickness of 62mm. This straight away tells me the max radiator thickness for this area will be slim 30mm thick rads. Here I was able to install Thermaltake's own SR420 Slim with fans or a Hydrolabs GTS 420 with fans, no issues at all. For the left side support, here is up to 360mm radiators with a max length of 405mm to the PCIe bracket. Radiator width is better here, and once removing the left PSU cover, there's roughly 140mm to the first PCIe slot. Here I was able to fit another Hydrolabs radiator, but this time a 54mm thick GTR 360 with fans. Now before we finish this review, let's take a look at the final build. Now, like always, a few things to cover before I wrap this review up. One thing I found interesting was all the PCI slots, the bracket covers were not installed. Now, I don't really mind that. And further to that, these were all white. Now, compared to on the Tower 300, they were black. So I think on all of Thermaltake's previous white cases, all of the PCI covers were black. All of the screws were black, even on the Tower 300, and even the clips up here that hold that front tempered glass in were also black as well. So now the Tower 600, I believe, is their first one in this new change of color with the white PCI slot covers and also the plastic clips, and all the screws as well are now moving over to silver. So that's something good to see. A lot of people probably don't care, but I just think it's a nice touch. It's a nice aesthetic because now everything is going to theme in nicely with the white build. Now, one thing I did find, nothing really going to sort of help with the build, but it does neaten the build up overall, is this little bit of plastic here. Now, you might be wondering what that is. That is a channel, a guide. So all of your IO is up here. That is a guide that just covers all of those cables up, because if they were just hanging down, you may even see them just dropping down there, and who knows what cover or colors or writing or so on they have on. I do believe they are all white. On the Tower 300, all the cables coming out of your IO were black. But normally they have writing and so on. Sometimes they can be different colors, but having that plastic cover that wraps around and goes around to the back just cleans that up nicely. Now, one thing that I did find quite interesting, I've mentioned this before in some case reviews, mainly to do with the tempered glass panels that are on white cases that are 100% clear. Normally on the, I would say this is the live edge or the cut edge of the glass, it looks very, very green. Now, I'm not sure if brands have been able to get around this to make it not so green, but one thing I did notice compared to the Tower 600 to the Tower 300 was the green edge on that cut edge of the glass was pretty much gone. I'm not sure how they got around it or how they managed to crack the code to get that, to get it more clear. There's always going to be a bit of color. It's just the way it's done. It's more of a lightish blue aqua, but I'll get some shots up to, it's hard to get on camera, but definitely in real life, you can see on the Tower 300, that edge is very, very green. And when you're moving around the case on different angles, especially when the main glass meets this edge, you can see that green line down the middle on each side. But on the Tower 600, it was much, much harder to see. And I think they've gone with a different way with the glass, or definitely done a different finishing result to get that green pretty much gone, which I think is pretty good. Now, rear cable management, I said I will cover. I had no issues around the back. But in saying that, this build was a little bit different, I would say, than what most people would do, because I would think this case isn't really designed for custom water cooling, but hey, this is GGF, this is what we do. We're gonna have a crack at it, see how we go. But this Tower 600 is mainly designed for all-in-one coolers, and it would do a sweet job at that. And I had no issues around the back, even though I had soft tubing, because I've got, this radiator has the 2 soft tubing runs going straight up and around the back. This radiator has the soft tubing going straight up around the back. I could have flipped this rad around and had the ports at the bottom, which would have worked, but this one I couldn't flip around, because if you flip it around, the rad ports are at the very bottom, and that's right next to the power supply. You don't have much more width than that, and it would have been too tight. So I decided to shoot them straight up. So I have a bunch of tubes. I even have one tube going from this rad, routing around to this rad. So I have a heat going on. So I didn't have any issues. It's good that you got those channels either side, and you can fit quite a lot of cables in the back, which is good. Now, one thing I want to mention that's not really a flaw with this case, that you have to bear in mind with air-cooled GPUs, the way that vapor chambers work, it's happened on all these tower cases that the cooling may not work as it's supposed to, or not work as good when your GPU is in this position straight up like this. Obviously, water-cooled, not going to matter. It's a completely different setup, but some brands, some different GPUs, some air coolers work differently, and the way they're sitting, whether they're horizontal, vertically, or vertically up like this, that will affect performance on some cards. Not so much to do with the way the case is done. I mentioned this in the CT750, that these type of cases I think have been around a lot longer, especially the Tower 900, I think was one of the first. That's probably 6-7 years old. And I think that was before all these vapor chambers came out. So I believe the case market was there first, and then these cards that have this new technology and so on, they only like a certain orientation to perform the best. Now, in saying that, you can rotate this case around 90, so you can rotate it lengthways. You can rock it that way, or you can rock it this way with a $35 US. I'm gonna call it a stand kit. Now, it was on the Tower 300. Obviously, if you have that, this one's gonna be a little bit bigger to accommodate the Tower 600. So you get both of these in the kit. Very simple. You might be running, well, why do you get another top, which basically this is? So what you do is you take the feet off, because when you put it on its side, you don't want to see the ugly feet. So you put it on its side. I actually put it on here first, on its side, either way you want, depending on how, I guess, your fans are set up. One thing I would like to mention is if you do have a custom loop and you plan to do it this way and horizontal on the base, you'll have to remember your pump orientation. Something to keep in mind with your reservoir. Obviously, if you turn at 90, your reservoir could sort of empty, or it may not. I'll talk about the reservoir I used in this build a little bit later on. But yeah, basically you put it on the side, take the feet off, snap this on. So this just makes it symmetrical. It makes it top. Then you have the main case, and then you have this end. So it makes it the same at either end. And then it just sits on here like this. This does come flat packed. I won't take it out, but these just clip in. It's all toolless, very, very strong, just like that. It is all plastic. It's only 35 bucks. Like, you don't need this to be made out of steel or aluminum. Now, when you do pick up this kit, it's advised to get the same color as the chassis that you have. Obviously, this is the white kit. I believe the stand is the same. You don't really see the stand once it's on. It's all this titanium grayish color. But obviously, white case, you got the white kit, so you get the white side. Now, you don't have to. You could go with the yellow side. It would be a bit weird because only one of them is a different color. It'd be pretty cool if you could purchase more of these. So you could have like the front IO ones. You could have yellow or on the top and the bottom, or you could go with the black or any other colors they have. that'd be pretty cool just to mix it up a bit. But when you get the kit, you just get the other side because it has no IO, and then that is pretty much it. So I think $35, that's not too bad, and it just gives you something a little bit different. It is going to take up a lot more room because obviously our height is the largest area at the moment, which I think is pretty good. Just doesn't take up that much room on the desk, but obviously when you lie it down, as you saw in the B-roll, it does take up a lot more desk real estate. Alrighty, before I cover the price on the case, I want to talk about the build. As I said, not really designed for custom loop. I managed to jam it in. The main issue I had was trying to get all the runs nice and clean. I ripped out the 2 removable PSU covers. I kept the very, very back little bit that had the 2 pass-throughs for your 24 pin. I cut it down. I left it about this long so the 24 pin could still run through. And that acted as a support for this acrylic panel. Then I just added some pass-throughs. I screwed it to the little lip here, threaded some holes, and that's pretty much it. Ran everything down because once you take this panel off, there's still quite a bit of room in there. Now, the main issue I see most people having with going with a custom loop in this case is reservoir support. Now, you could think, well, you could just throw an FLT or like a distro type res, a flat res on one of the sides. Now, that's what I was going to do, but you have to be careful that you're not going to run out of room. Obviously, this side is much tighter. You're going to hit the bottom of the PSU if you go with the 360. 240 wouldn't be too bad because the pump can stick out a bit. If you go with the front facing pump where it's not at the back, you would have room to fit it in here. This side wouldn't be too bad, but as you can see, I'm getting pretty close to this GPU. But for the build I went with the Bits Power, I think it's a CR801. That is an 80 millimeter. That's all it is, super small. And it has Bits Power's own sort of DDC pump that goes on the back. It's actually not much bigger than a DDC pump. I managed to put that in the back. I did have to cut a little bit of the case out because there wasn't much room in the back because I did have to fill it and so on. But that's one thing to keep in mind. I could have put like a tube res hanging off here, but I didn't want that sticking in the way of your view because you have a really nice, I wouldn't say 180, but it's kind of a large area you can see inside the case. You got this side, the front side, and then this angled side. So you can see quite a lot of the build, and I didn't want to throw in a big, humongous pump res combo. Now, when I do these builds, I always like to try and keep one brand for all of the water cooling products. Now, being Thermaltake, I really wanted to go with everything Thermaltake, but unfortunately, their radiators, they don't really do anything thicker in white than their slims. So they do a 420. I mentioned earlier in the review, I used one. That's a slim, and they do a 360 slim in the white as well. But I wanted to beef this out a little bit. Wanted to fill up the case a bit more because the case isn't that small. You do have a bit of room inside, especially with that ATX board. So I went with Hardware Labs white rads. I do like those that have no logos, no branding, very clean looking. And then the only other thing I went with was that Bits Power pump res combo because I do use a lot of the Thermaltake pump res combos, but most of them I always do are D5s, and their reses are very bulky. So I think if I was to put one in here, it would literally fill this whole area up. So it just wasn't going to work. Another area I want to cover is the LCD screen here. Now I did paint that surround white. Now I don't know why. I mentioned earlier in this review, they do offer that LCD kit. I think it was $89, $90 for that LCD kit. They do give you the surround in the kit, like I mentioned with the case, but you do have to buy the screen. Just plugs into USB into a USB header, which is pretty nice, and then you run their software. But the whole screen plastic surround comes in black. So if you got this nice case, I didn't even try it beforehand. I straight away went, no, I'm gonna paint that because I don't want that whole surround black. Now it does look black now because it's off, because that is the screen. But once it's on, it does look much better. You can customize it and change it how you want. But yeah, that's pretty much it with the build. Went with an Aorus, that's the X670E. That's their Pro X. I think that's pretty new. The whole PCB is white. I really wanted to test that board out, see how it went in a white build, because a lot of white motherboards, they look white. The heat sinks are either white or silver, but then the PCB is black. This one was all white, and I think it worked out really well with the build. And then we have the 7800X3D 4080 Super with the Thermaltake block. So this would be a really decent little gaming PC. And then also that memory, that is the new G.SKILL. They just released it M series. I believe it's M-Die. It's meant to be better tuned. I think that's 6000 at CL28, which is pretty speedy memory. Now for price for this case, I definitely know there's a white and a black model. If I look at the Tower 300 lineup, I think there's like 7 colors. Now, I don't believe all those colors are going to be available at launch, but I think there's going to be 4 or so. So stay tuned to see if they do release more colors. But I've been told $170 US for all of the colors that are coming out. So that'll be the black, that'll be the white. This one, they'll probably have the hydrangea blue, I believe. And then probably I think they do the green as well, and maybe a yellow, but we'll have to wait and see. So I think that's not too bad. You might be thinking, well, there are other cases. The $150 mark to, I would say, $180 in the case field is very, very highly competitive. There's a lot of brands with cases in that, but the thing with this case, you might be thinking, well, there's not too much you can customize. Motherboard has to go there. There's only 2 rad spots. That's it. But to me, I think the expense that comes into this would be all of the tooling. I can just try to count all the sides now. So straight away, you've got 8 panels for the main sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then you got 9, 10, 11. Then you got the bottom 12. This comes off. That's 13. There's so many bits and pieces. And it's not just that. Every panel like this one that comes in it has removable dust filter. Even the other screen accessory panel, this one has a removable dust filter on each side. These little ones here have removable dust filters. Removable dust filters on the radiator sides. The back has one. The top has removable dust filter. The bottom one, I don't think I've seen a case that has this many panels before. So that's probably where the cost is coming to. But I think $170, that's not too bad. We're not talking like $300 like we've seen cases in the past that are similar to this size. But in saying that, I think this is a really good case for all-in-one cooled builds. Not so much water cooling, but as I said, that's all we do. So we had to give it a go. But anyway, I think that's it for this video. I want to thank Thermaltake for sending this out to let me check out, do a build and do a review. Now I do have a time-lapse video I will finish editing in the next few days, so you can stay tuned and see that. But anyway, thanks for watching and see you in the next one.